Okay, great. Well, very excited to share the stage here with 4 awesome panelists from diverse backgrounds. You've already heard Scott talk as well, but just to give you a preview in terms of what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to be talking about disruptive trends that we've been observing across biotechs, and then our hopes for further innovation to spark discourse with this group, and then how do we actually de-risk and accelerate drug development. So if you could each introduce yourselves for starters and what you're working on, please.
Sure. Hi, everybody. And Rahul, thanks for having me. I'm Kate Haviland. I'm the president and CEO of Blueprint Medicines.
Yes. Hello. My name is Detlev. I'm the managing director at MPM, CEO of 3 other companies, past experience in pharma and biotech leader.
I'm Luba Greenwood. I'm a CEO of Kojin Therapeutics. I'm also the managing partner, and I started the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute Venture Fund. Detlev said the most important company he's the CEO of is NextPoint, which we're also an investor. Fantastic company, and it's wonderful to be back. It's been, I was thinking, I was also pharma and investment, and I was here at Google 5 years ago. It was actually great to see Nate in coffee, still here, which was wonderful. And yeah, no, it's great to be back. And I remember my kids used to practice their public speaking abilities right here. So thanks for having me back.
Hi, I'm Scott in the CTO office at Google Cloud, and I bought the coffee today.
Great. Just so we get a sense of the audience here, how many folks are on the R&D side within biotech and pharma? Let's say commercialization, other aspects of it. And then how many folks are on the AI, ML side? Obviously, there's going to be some overlap here. Great. OK, that's helpful. So a couple of things. First, I wanted to talk about the progress that we've made before we talk about where we need to go. So we've certainly made a lot of progress. We talked about convergence of tech and biotech and the impact that that's had. But let's also talk about, want to recognize the progress that we've made. So perhaps, Luba, if you could start, where are the areas over the last 5 years or so where you've seen the most improvements that we should talk about?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, huge difference between now and even 5 or 6 years ago. So 6 years ago, I was, or no, 7 years ago, so I was at Roche, and we did the Flatiron acquisition. And that was, people didn't even talk about artificial intelligence. ChatGPT was not even a thing. And we were still looking for digital pathology. I mean, now pretty much everybody has some sort of a digital pathology, either a company they're invested in, or there is a company, or it's part of your pharma company. Or even you have just the same capabilities at academic institutions such as Mayo Clinic and Dana-Farber. But we've come a long way since being really excited about Flatiron, which I remember when we went in and did the diligence for Flatiron, it was so exciting. Wow, you're using this cool data and you're able to, again, what now you have LLM can do it with ease, but at the time they would hire a lot of people that would basically just categorize a lot of that data, and that was considered advanced. So you can imagine how much we've come along, even though it was just about 5 years ago. And I would say where we really have come along long ways, and I think because of companies like Flatiron that started and paved the way, is in the area of development. We're seeing Google, of course, is doing really exciting things, for example, in using artificial intelligence in early discovery. I think that combination, and of course, I think you had Oken here speaking as well. You have Tempests of the world that are doing really a great job on the development and where we can apply AI and think about how do we match the right patient to the right trial, how do we find novel indications. But I think we're still long ways from making sure that we can do end-to-end solution in a true novel way.
Detlev, given your background and you've been involved in many companies, what progress would you like to call out in terms of company creation and how companies are being funded as well?
Yes. This is a complex question, and maybe I should start off that I believe there have been so far 3 phases of drug development in since the start. The initial one was just to develop drugs against like chemotherapy against general general phenotypic screens. That lasted actually almost 100 years. The second phase was just driven by finding a targeted approach, just finding a single actor. And I think my neighbor is one of the leaders in this one, where you find a specific gene in this. And we are end of this. There's still some nuggets to be found, but it gets more and more difficult. So the next revolution, which started about 5 to 10 years ago, is the localization of an effect. And that is really driven by, I think one of the best examples is the antibody ADCs, which suddenly take a very generic approach into a specific tissue that drives something. But also we're seeing RNA technologies that tries to locate it to the brain. And so this is the really new game in town, is the localization of a specific effect. And so we have made lots of progress over this last year. We're really good at targeting now specific drugs, but I really believe the number of targets which come out more and more targeting a single gene or a single protein, it will be limited because of the effect. But I also believe that the localization will not drive. So what comes after that? This is one of the key questions. And what comes after this is synergistic biology. And I think this is what AI can really drive some benefit, is then we discover a gene that pushes something into a direction which makes it amenable to a certain other drug. Those are the complex synergistic, which are very difficult to decipher with a physical experiments, and this is which will AI lead, I hope, over the next 30 years to discover those biological constructs, yes, and help us to decipher them in the clinic.
Great. And mentioned precision medicine. So Kate, would love if you could educate us on the evolution of precision medicine. You've been at Blueprint for a number of years now and have seen that certainly evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's many common themes to what other panelists have mentioned, but really, when you think about focusing on cancer or rare blood diseases, I mean, truly they are genetic diseases at their core. And I think the advancements we've had in technology around being able to detect those kind of genetic drivers of things like cancer have really just opened up a wealth of opportunity for us to target the genetic driver and just change the outcome for patients in a very transformative way. But cancer is not a static condition. It is a dynamic condition. And I think a couple of the things that we have evolved at Blueprint is to push those systems and to try to predict where the cancer is going to go. So you may start with the initial kind of driving mutation, but where do you think it's going to go next? Because it always does go next somewhere. And how do you then build that into your first generation of therapies? So not only are you addressing the primary driver, but preventing the most likely areas of resistance, which enables just more durable and deeper responses for patients for a longer period of time. So I think that's one thing that we've been doing. And similar to the comment around synergistic biology, I mean, we believe that having very precise and very clean molecules enables you to be able to combine. And I think for me, the real future here is combination therapies, because cancer is dynamic, because there are so many different things going on in patients, particularly as they get into second and third line therapies, that you need to have drugs that can play well together, that patients can tolerate, but can also respond to the evolution of those cancers. And so having very precise and specific drugs, which is what we do really well at Blueprint, enables you to move with the cancer, to combine with other therapies that are coming through, and to really drive those outcomes for longer lasting and more durable health benefits for patients.
Wonderful. And Scott, given your perspective on software, curious where you've seen the most advancements in terms of application of software to, let's say, drug discovery, and what's been most fruitful so far?
I guess where I came into it, this is relatively new for me, but I think I'm learning from all of you. But I think what I found interesting is, like systems biology, that came out, started looking, instead of just looking at one correlation, if you look at these, correlation graphs, and a lot of discoveries of medicines are finding, correlation between a particular gene and an outcome and saying, looks like there's something here as a potential target or something else. But now, if you're starting to deal with, how can you look at the genome, the epigenome, multiomics, metabolomics, and look at the whole self and create these probabilistic digital twins to start experimenting with synergistic biology. Correlations take you so far. But then how do you do the same correlations but in a much more high-dimensional space and reason with these things to find these medications, and where now the mathematics and programming can help you reduce the space you have to explore. I think the techniques you've done for years that I'm learning from you, those aren't going away. But the amount of space you have to explore and the time it takes to do that is shrinking dramatically. And that's where I think the work we're doing at Google, we hope can be helpful. Because if we can make searching for drugs like searching for an answer, or like where to buy a ticket for a movie, could it be, that's maybe a dream, but as you start to ask the right questions, could we make the computing substrate as powerful enough to take something that used to take you months into seconds? And I think that gets really interesting. And then working with regulators, as you discover patterns, and certain sets of drugs, more than I do, that almost are like software. And if you're just changing one piece of the software, could you get an approval for that overall platform? And that allows us to chase the cancer, right? So as the cancer evolves, you sequence, I got another one for you. And as you're chasing it around the body, you're starting to have these different therapeutics that can actually, it's the same platform. Could have been a monoclonal antibody, could it be, a Moderna-based drug or an mRNA-based drug. That's really interesting to me. And I think we have lots to learn from you in terms of how we can be helpful there. That's what I find is pretty fascinating, and where what some people would call hyperscale AI, it's a very powerful tool and partner in that science.
Can I, if I may, I actually, you're quite an expert, so I think we can learn from you as well.
Student.
And the reason I say it is because at the end of the day, as you said, it's not just about genomics. We're at Dana-Farber, and I think about 90% of patients that come in, first of all, they're almost 100% of patients are stage 4. Late stage cancer, stage 3, stage 4 cancer. And there's really the current therapies, even with the specific, if there's a specific genetic mutation, just don't work by themselves. That's number one. Number two is, as you said, it's not just about a particular genome. I think we've mined what we could with just a particular genetic alteration.
Right.
And super precision. Okay, we know that genetic alteration, we're going to make a drug. Most patients, they come in, first of all, late stage, even if it's just one genetic alteration. Most come in with cancers that don't just have one genetic alteration. They have nothing. We still put them on the same drugs we've had 50 years ago.
Right.
We're still doing the same thing that we did, we're still cutting things out, we're still giving them the same chemo. Yeah, maybe improved, maybe with lower side effects and things like that, a little more optimized, a little more precise. At the end of the day, it's not really all that novel. And just like as Detlev was saying, it's about biology. And as you were saying, it's about applying artificial intelligence to learn not just from genomics, but from omics and all the other omics that you can. How can we find novel biology? How do we explore additional pathways? Maybe there's some untapped targets. Maybe there are known targets. We don't have to always go for undruggable, unknown targets. Maybe there is a known druggable target that we can go after that's not specifically linked to a particular disease with a particular one genomic alteration. So I think, yes, we've made great progress, but I think with AI, and we shouldn't be talking just about cancer. I mean, cancer is a serious problem. But we are living a lot longer, and there are a lot of diseases with high medical needs, liver disease. We've got cardiometabolic, aging disease, brain. Brain, we still don't know. I think there's just some more data came out that it's not about amyloid beta. What is it? We personally think, of course, we're a ferroptosis company, a novel biology company. We think everything's related to ferroptosis. Of course, it's a novel type of cell death, cancer, and fibrosis and any osis, everything is related to ferroptosis. But we also, of course, use AI, and it's a key tool. We actually never even talk about AI capabilities because for us it's a given. You can't inform and find novel even pathways, not even targets within the pathway, but novel pathways and how they relate to a particular manifestation of a particular disease for a population without using AI tools.
It's like trying to do medicine without correlation.
Yeah.
You sort of need it.
Exactly.
Right? And it's a bit new platform. And I think what's really interesting now is that now we can actually reduce the complexity to something we can manage with the math we've known for years, for decades. And so now thinks about what simple actions could you do to steer the gut biome, for example, and could that be a therapeutic? And that's a whole new area, right? So there's so many different things about looking at the whole self that you can look at better cancers where, think Alzheimer's, it's very complex. For years we're chasing, is there a silver bullet? And a lot of the research is saying, well, it's more like a set of things. And that maybe you probably know more about than anybody else, but I think that's something very interesting and maybe AI can be helpful there.
Yeah. I mean, I think what we're highlighting is that there's lots of progress that's been made, but lots more to do. Right? In 2022, there were 37 new drugs that were approved. That's down from 51 in the prior 5 years on average. And we're in the midst of quite a bit of layoffs and a significant correction that's happening within biotech. 250 plus companies that have had layoffs, just given the inherent risk in drug development. Detlev, I'm curious, from a venture perspective, one, what's caused the current correction, and how do you see that holding us back in the years to come?
It's a really interesting question. So I'll give you my view, which people might disagree. I don't think there's a standard answer to this. But I believe the current crisis is formed by overinvesting in very marginal improvement of ideas. I think biotech had a lot of capital inflow over the last 10 years, and this was not always the smartest capital. So biotech companies were funded, which had, the 8th PD-1 to market, even though there's still a limited understanding actually how PD-1 works and how to differentiate it. So you had so many companies, I think I counted 500 companies that have clinical trials in cytokines with marginal ideas. There might be some really good in there, but it's really difficult to find them. There's about, you can go from target to target. It was okay to not do a great job, but just to do something, being 4th, 5th to market in something somebody else showed was marginal data. So the truth is, success rate in the clinical trials dropped really significantly. That spooks every financial investor. They look at a few metrics, and one of them is success rate in phase 3 trials, and it dropped off phase 2, 3 trials, and that dropped tremendously. But it was driven by many companies competing with same target, not the same stories, similar data, and not everybody can win. And that's, I think this is at fundamentally what is. And it's a little bit like, I'm a little bit of a paleontology nut. And if you think about, what happened to the dinosaurs, the non-avian dinosaurs, I have to say, we have something similar right now. Every crisis of biotech is like a crisis in human Earth development. And I think the solutions which come out are not the ones which we had before. Conditions will be very different. We don't know whatever the crossover will recover, what's the financial markets going to be. We really don't know this. And so I'm on the look for new solutions. AI might be, but maybe not. I think there is always something new coming out. And for me, this is cool. This is the best time in life. We're seeing an experiment, and I'm excited to see what are the winners out of in 2-3 years, and because they will shape the next 15 years. And you got to watch those, And it's not the same companies were the winner before. And so that's what I think caused it, but also there's excitement to see what the new solution's going to be. And I can tell you, one of the winners will be who can convince investors in this difficult time to fund them. That's one of the criteria, but not the only one. So that's my view.
Yeah. Kate, running a now publicly traded company with a market cap of 3 billion plus, with an earnings call tomorrow, so thank you for joining us today. How do you think about the current environment and where you encourage folks to focus to drive value creation?
Yeah, I think, I mean, building on what Detlev said, I mean, I think that we all, it's human nature to overestimate what you can do in 1 year and underestimate what you can do in 10. And just, this is, biotech and drug development is a very capital intensive model. And so, I think having a short, making sure that people retain that long-term view, really that ambitious goal, what is it that you're really trying to do? And then you have to just execute in the short term. And I think, so many people I see, and with all the company creation that happened, just believe that the science was gonna make its way. And the data is gonna talk, the science is gonna get there. And I just fundamentally believe, having been part of many small high growth organizations, I've been at Blueprint now for almost 8 years and joined the company when we just opened our first IND, that execution is so critical. Because you can have all the greatest science and medicine in the world, and if you can't figure out how to allocate capital, how to keep people motivated, how to invest in the programs that are going to be the winners or be able to return to investors, how to develop organizational resilience, because we will fail. There will be failures, and you have to plan ahead for that. Those are the types of things that it really takes experienced teams to build and navigate what is ultimately a business that we've all signed up for, where you fail more than you succeed. And that, to me, becomes really critical. It's something that we continue to talk about, weekly at Blueprint. Capital allocation, where is our money best spent? How do we want to think about that? I also say that we grew up in a time and raised over $1 billion in capital markets, similarly, same amount in business development, but that was a time, we were very lucky to evolve the company during a time when the cost of capital was, quite low, and there was a lot of access. And so, I am involved with other companies now that are smaller and still kind of working their way through those early stages. And I think that, not losing sight of that operational excellence, even at the earliest days, and thinking very seriously about capital allocation, I think is very important.
And Luba now is coming from a Series A company now for you. How are you thinking differently than, let's say, what Kate described, given where you are from a drug development perspective?
So I love everything that Kate said. So I'm actually thinking exactly like Kate.
Yeah.
I said, I love the operational resilience. I think that's beautiful, beautifully said. I think that actually, to Kate's point, that even though you're a Series A company, you have to think seriously in this market. You can't say, oh, I'm in la la land, I'm Series A, I can afford not to be thinking seriously about operational resilience, about your allocation. Even if you have a platform technology like we do, that doesn't mean that you can now do everything. That means, hey, get your first program into the clinic, do it right, think about the indication and indications, hopefully, and other applications, and build a strong team. It's very, very different than it was 2 years ago, even for a Series A company. Our Series A companies, I do have to say, speaking about operational, we had money with SVB, and so that was an interesting time. Yeah. And I remember when I was going to, and a lot of these larger banks like BOA and others, when I called them, they were so happy. They said, "Oh wow, you're coming in and you're giving us 60 million." And I said, which is not that much, it's not $1 billion, but 60 million. They're pretty excited about that account. And I said, yeah, but we're gonna draw on it, 2-3 million a month, and then they don't want to talk to you anymore. They said, well, you're not a good client, and then they just want to hang up on you. Exactly, because they said, oh yeah, we don't need to do the KYC, the know your customer things. Don't worry, we'll set up. I'm sorry, what did you say? How fast is your burn rate? So yeah, it was almost like click. No, thank you. But yeah.
Did you end up moving back to SVB after things?
No,
down?
we did not. We still did not. But I can tell you, they were not answering your phone calls anymore as quickly.
So let's say downstream effects of where we are right now. So it sounds like what we're saying is that clinical data is now at a premium. Platform technologies are still interesting, but as long as we can get them into the clinic. What happens to perhaps 10x ideas in this sort of environment? And what advice would you have for folks that are thinking about starting something new? How should they navigate that? Anyone, yeah.
I mean, you have to be going for the 10x idea. I think that's just table stakes. Because, if you're not, then you're looking at incremental innovation or Me Too's or, and that's not the model for biotech, right? So to me, that's just where you need to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think nothing incremental in these days. I think you all said the right thing. Is like you need to have good ideas, but actually you need to execute at lower cost. The model which we did over the last 5 years to just drive burn rate to get a result maybe a month earlier than, I don't think it's working anymore, because you are in such a tough time to go IPO, and it used to be no problem going IPO at 500, 600, 700 million. The averages for a biotech is like 300 to 350 million. You often need to be lower, I would assume, in this time to get public. And if you are developing an idea, get into the clinic at a $250 million IPO, you will be going out over the next 18 months. I really believe this. The markets will open. But if you have a marginal idea and want to go at 500 million, you die. And I think this is the reality. We need to be better on the ideas we fund. We need to be better on the execution at lower cost. And that means talent is the one who drives, like usually, all success.
Yeah, especially if your marginal idea is 80 pre, then you're never going to get to the clinic at 200 post. So that's never going to happen. So yeah, absolutely, and I completely agree with the talent is important, and I think this is where a lot of the challenges now are. The extraordinarily talented people, a lot of them are also, which is interesting. I'd be curious what all of you think. I find sometimes they are much more risk averse at times. And so as a result, they recognize intellectually that, of course, you should go into a novel idea because that's where the biggest upside, but then that may ruin their track record. Because here you have this amazing track record, and you've had an amazing track record partially because of really good times. But there is a little bit of fear, and I see this in companies that we're funding. There is some hesitation among really, truly talented people. Ooh, do I really want to go into this really, really early place? Or is it better to be not the third or fourth or fifth Me Too, but the second Me Too doesn't sound too bad. Because that's going to get into or maybe that's already at IND stage. How nice is that? So that's a little bit, I don't know if you're all seeing the same, that's an issue.
Yeah, I'm working in a first-in-class company. It is. It's hard.
What is it?
Because it's much easier if a pharma company, let's be honest, pharma company shows some positive results, and you as a biotech company have a marginal differentiation. It's so much easier to raise money. Truly innovative projects are tough in this environment, but those are not even 10x. Those are the 100x. They change things, but it is a ride, I'm telling you guys.
Yeah, I think, thanks for bringing up talent, by the way. I'll get you a beer afterwards, because that's obviously something I've been thinking a lot about. I think in many ways we're in the golden age of innovation in many ways across our sector. But we continue to apply fairly archaic operating models in terms of how we scale teams, because there's really been no optionality, right? It's either been, hey, let's go out and hire a bunch of full-time folks, or tap into our network, or go and leverage CROs, where there's obviously a time and a place. So I do hope, obviously, that there's quite a bit of disruption in terms of how we think about building teams and accessing talent. So we've talked, we're coming up on time. We've talked about, and really we've just scratched the surface on disruptive forces. Scott, I'll start with you. Let's fast forward to 2030 and beyond. What do you hope drug development and the biotech ecosystem looks like in the years to come? And then we'll just go down the panel.
I think it may look a lot more like software, in the sense that we're starting to understand at a first principles level what's happening inside. Let's see the genome and now the epigenome and everything else. And you're starting to see some fascinating companies. I highlighted a couple of them, in my talk, where can you start to look at these as like, your personal, like a personal medication. And we're seeing, I guess Blueprint's doing some of this as well. But I think about, innovative new companies will be the kind of thing where you go to your doctor and you're like, wait, you took this medicine without being sequenced? It's kind of thing where, having that kind of information will seem very strange to so many people to actually be able to take a generic medication. This generic medication is really is great, but it works for 1 out of 14 in general. And in the future, I think we'll be able to take gradations of that. So like we have a medication, but there's 4 or 5 different variants of it that you can then take. And then that's all about, I think these sort of data-driven, and AI may actually contribute to that, and I'm really excited about that. We're now it's much more of a data-driven thing. It's more mobile. It's in your hand. You can do a lot of early diagnosis. And, hey, doc, what about this paper? Like, how'd you find that? Well, because I just uploaded my sequence and it showed me the paper, right? And that's where you're getting at the 4th P, where people can now participate in their healthcare. They're going to be armed with this data, and they can bring it in. It's a very rich conversation, and so that's what I'm looking forward to.
Great. Luba?
Yeah, so I love that. It's funny, before you started speaking, I was thinking, ooh, what would 2030 be like? And I was thinking, hey, if you just type in ChatGPT, how do you make a drug for this? And you describe the person and all the stats, a 25-year-old female. And so you say that, and then it just pops out what you need. I think that's more 2050, maybe?
2050.
Yes,
Yeah.
not 2030. But I think that's where you're going. But I think between what I would like to see by 2030 to get there at 2050 is improve our understanding. Again, I think it goes back to Detlev and Kate, our understanding more of biology and disease. And also the communication between our teams. So for example, your team working with my team. And I'll give you an example. I'm on a board of a company called Benchside.
Oh, sure.
And yes, fantastic.
Yeah, Canada.
Yes, in Canada. So they're a fantastic company. I think everybody, whenever a pharma company says, oh, I'm going to build something internal, I say, just talk to Benchside. They can do this, with their eyes closed. And fantastic company. And so we actually started looking into, can you do exactly that with ChatGPT style? And I think matching, to your point, the right patients to potentially right trials, or right patient to the right known drugs, or even thinking about the combination of drugs, or finding maybe better optimization chemically of a current drug, that we can actually do already by 2030. The part where we still need to work on is what's interesting. We did some experiments, and we found that ChatGPT still gives us, where AI doesn't give you sort of fake publications. ChatGPT kind of makes stuff up a little bit, and it's a little scary, because you would get really, really wonderful results, and something that you as a scientist, even though in the art, wouldn't find that paper and wouldn't understand the relevance of that target to the pathway you care about. But then the other 20 things are just made up. So it would be nice if you have, and that's what companies like Benchside is working on, making sure that you have the scientists working together with your software engineers. As you said, eventually it's SaaS. You will have SaaS. You will have software that does this for you. But you have to enable the software right now with the knowledge of the scientists. So they're hiring a lot of scientists to weed those results out so that you get the right stuff. But absolutely, I think hopefully even earlier by 2050, but we'll get there.
Yes.
Detlev, you'll be out of job. I'm sorry. I'm
Yes.
so sorry. You'll be retired.
I hope. Yes. So I'm actually less optimistic on change over the next 10 years. And the key problem is that we have a really powerful engine at the front with lots of science, lots of ideas, all those things. And everybody who has brought, and I've brought, I think, 7, 8 projects into the clinic, realize there's a screeching halt when you file your IND, and then it's just walking, and waiting and walking, doing one little step. None of the sophistication is anymore. It's about, the doctor can recruit one patient in this segment. The FDA wants to disagrees with all your sophistication and says it's maple, and it's one assay gives you the starting dose. And all the sophistication is really gone in this if you ever led a preclinical to a clinical company, it is day and night, and it actually starts to not be fun, not intellectual, but just purely, okay, I don't understand what the FDA guides us to, but that's what I have to do. And so until we revolutionize how we do clinical trials and how the FDA buys into approval of drugs, it will be always the same. Super powerful Porsche Ferrari engine on the front, and it's a Volkswagen at the end. And I love a minibus.
Well,
you know.
it's not that bad.
It's not bad. Maybe a Yugo. But it is very pedestrian at the end of the getting a drug over the. I don't think this changes. I'm
How
really.
about 15 years?
But it's my point is more
No, I get
that needs to change, and I don't know who drives that change. There's nobody that I can point to. That the FDA makes it sometimes even difficult right now to get drugs over the time. And so.
So,
it
Detlev,
is-
question for you then is, what about their early activity on, monoclonal antibodies, using mRNA-based drugs, where some of that actually is software, like designing the tooltip that actually goes for the, or actually designing the payload that goes into mRNA, like that. If we have an approval, something like that, which could go through the pedestrian process of multiple years, but that could unleash a whole set. I'm just curious because that way it's like 2 approvals. Could we get those through in the next 7 years? And from that, then it opens up a whole slate of, not generic for everybody, but a class of medicines.
No, and so if you actually look back, which areas has been successful? You have a biomarker where the FDA bought into a biomarker that is an early readout of a clinical success. Simple example is LDL or cholesterol.
Sure.
Certain other PSA for prostate cancer. So all the innovation in this area was driven by that the FDA. Until they buy into one of those biomarkers, but you will only change one area at the time. It's not that there's a general perception that, at least I don't know a biomarker that helps you across oncology indication. It is something in your indication that helps. So it enables one indication, but not all. Until we differently think about actually approving drug, I really think some of the thinking how to. So I feel we need to get to an area that if you can prove you don't do harm, why? And this would enable the next, and this is what I started off, the next level of innovation. Why not approving a drug which has no effect, but is not harmful to a person? That drug might actually enable a second drug in a certain circumstances to be synergistic. And until we allow more of those plays, we're limiting the number of plays. And so we don't get that combination, that synergistic portfolio. And I think we need to think differently. Why is the FDA not allowing things that are maybe have no effect, but are not harmful to patients on the market?
Kate, you were going to say something.
No, I was going to say, Scott, to your point, I think one of the classes of drugs where, at least previous life, I was at Sarepta, and we were looking at the nucleic acid drugs, right? And one of the things we were trying to do is talk about how the backbone, the chemical backbone, drives the safety profile, and the nucleic acid sequence drives the efficacy. And could we kind of leverage that through the different drugs that target kind of different subtypes through the FDA? Obviously, I'm not a Sarepta anymore, so I don't know where they are on that, but I haven't seen that come through yet. And that seems like an obvious place where it's the same disease, same biomarker, same technology. You should be starting to see some breaks in development, you'd assume. And I just I don't know that I've seen that from them, although I'm no longer at the company.
And then Kate, while you have the mic.
Yes.
2030 and beyond.
2030 and beyond. I mean, I think, I am very optimistic about our ability to continue to advance our scientific understanding and the drug development. I know it may be heretical to talk about beyond drug development, but as Rahul and I were talking about, the last mile in actually delivering these therapies to patients is quite difficult. And as Luba was saying before, I mean, by the time a patient gets to Dana-Farber, MSKK, or MD Anderson, they're late-stage patients, they're complex genetically, and most patients get their care in community. And I don't know how many of you have been in a community oncology center in a major metropolitan area. I was at one last week, and then went to see one of our investigators at the academic site nearby, and it is night and day. And the physicians are doing their best that they can in those community settings, but that's where the vast majority of patients get their care. And just, this physician said to me, you keep slicing up these patients into all these different subtypes and biomarkers. Like, I can't keep this straight. I can't even read a Foundation Medicine report. And we're not spending a lot of time thinking about that. And that is becoming a tremendous barrier. And it's also impacting the opportunity for biotech companies and other companies to realize the returns on things like targeted therapies and precision medicines, which feeds right back into who gets funded where and where do VCs put their money. And, it really is an area that I think a lot more time and attention needs to be spent. If we don't get our therapies to patients, none of this matters, right?
Yeah, I was shocked to learn that I think it's 90% of cancer patients are at community hospitals.
Yeah, and it's not until they advance and they're going to get much more complex, right? That then they get to some more of the academic centers, and then it's a different biology, it's a different patient. Just their physical status is much lower, right?
Yeah.
And that's the US.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Talking about
Yes.
India. Or
Right, exactly. I mean, that's just talking about what's going on here. So our science and our medicine is outpacing our opportunity to deliver this effectively to the patients who could actually benefit it. And so we do need to focus some effort there.
Great. Well, on that note, I know we're over, but thank you everyone